It wasn't friendly. It wasn't like it was trying to be Harry and the Hendersons, my best friend. I remember waking up that night and just feeling like I was going to die.
I've got one of the most terrifying Bigfoot encounters I've heard so far on this channel for you tonight. I've got a lady with me from Canada, and when she was 9 years old, I'm trying to figure out how to explain this to you guys, but she had an encounter with this creature, and this thing threatened to murder her whole family. Now, the strange thing about this was in a dream, but in the middle of this dream, she hears mindspeak, and this thing says something to her that shook her to the core and still messes with her today. We're going to deep dive into this encounter. Very strange stuff. I'm telling you guys, you don't want to miss this one. But before we do, I just want to say thanks for being here. If you've had an encounter, I would absolutely love to hear it. You can always email me at mysteriesunknownpodcast@gmail.com. But let's jump right into this story.
I guess in the very beginning, I was always described as a very imaginative child. That's how they said it. Oh, Natasha, you're such an imaginative child. um, and when they say it in that way and they kind of treat you that way, and you are kind of an imaginative child, I think that was the biggest curse in my life, is that I'm a very creative, imaginative person. And I think because of that, people tend to treat me as mentally unstable. And I think that they've always done that all my life, because it's not that I've acted mentally unstable or that I'm some kind of fragile flower or anything like that. It's just I was very independent. I was very stubborn. I had very strong ideas, and I was always coming up with these stories and imagination and everything. So when these things started happening to me, it, I made a conscious decision not to talk to anybody, my family, anybody about it, because I really didn't believe that anybody would ever believe anything that I would say, because I was this imaginative person, and I guess I was a bit dramatic too. That's probably why I went into acting later in life, and script writing and writing and all these things, is because I was just very creative and stuff. Um, so when I was a child, I spent half my life on my grandparents' farm, and they lived in rural Manitoba, close to a very, very small town called Sardo. It was a Ukrainian settlement, but my grandparents were Mennonite. And in the Mennonite faith, a lot of very, I guess you want to say orthodox. Don't want to say fundamental, because Mennonites are not fundamentalists. They're not. But they're very conservative in a way, but they're not. It's very hard to explain. But they're very like black and white about a few things. And they're very black and white about things like ghosts, monsters, um, magic. For them, you just don't go there. You just don't talk about it. You don't go there. You don't deal with it. That's kind of a no-no conversation. And like tarot cards, my mom found tarot cards in my room one time, and she just lost her mind. She thought I was like demon possessed or something because I had tarot cards. Because when you're older, you experiment with those dumb things and everything. And they're very, very, because in the Bible it repeatedly says, do not go to psychics, do not go to fortune tellers or psychics, or right. So the Mennonites are very firm about that. So the last thing you want to talk about is a possible supernatural experience in which some kind of psychic element is included, because you don't want to say, oh, I might be psychic or something, on my mind reading. That would be like, really, you might be demon possessed. No. The Mennonites don't the Mennonites aren't quick to jump to demon possession, but they are quick to jump to, are you being irrational, like maybe you shouldn't talk like that. So um, I loved the farm. I was always a city girl with a country girl heart, and I spent a lot of time running around in the bush. I wasn't afraid of bears. I wasn't afraid of animals. I had a horse. I would go horseback riding. Um, and there was just really nothing that stopped me when I was out in nature. I felt like I was a part of nature. So it wasn't like I was this city girl that was out of her element or anything like that. I was kind of a bipolar personality. I was a city girl and a country girl all the same. And I really didn't have a hard time transitioning between the two. So when I was a little girl, I spent a lot of time out in the forest, and I knew lots of things about birds and animals because my dad really loved birds and animals, and he taught me all about survival. I always told people I wasn't afraid to get lost in the bush because I would be fine. So I really liked things like bugs and stuff. So I used to go out in the middle of the night on the farm at like midnight, just because I loved the star. I wanted to see the stars. And when you're out in the country, and my grandma would turn all the lights off on the farm for me. I'd ask her, could you turn the farm lights off near the house so it'd go really dark? So then you could just sit on this warm concrete driveway because it was always really, it gets really hot here in Manitoba. So if it's a little cooler at night, you can sit on the concrete and it stays really nice and warm, and you can just kind of lie there and look at the stars, and it's just really magical. It's just so magical. You can hear the crickets, you can hear the coyotes, you can hear all these animals stirring around you, and there was always a farm dog, and he'd come sit beside me, and it was just completely opposite from what you get in the city. So, and I knew all the constellations because my dad taught me all about the constellations and stuff. So I just love doing that. And there was a side of the property that had like a cattle pasture and some forest. And then on the other side of the house, there was a really big pasture. And then there was a forest that would kind of edge it. But the pasture was quite large, so the house wasn't close to the bush on that side, but it was really close to the bush on the other side. And I used to look into the bush all the time because they had fireflies. And I just loved watching them fly around in the forest, these little blinking lights. And it was really cool to sit there in the dark and look at the and just enjoy, right? Um, and then it was really weird because when I was around, I think it was like 9 or 10. I can't remember exactly the age, but it was maybe it was like 9 or 10. I can't remember the exact dates. I remember coming one summer, it was the beginning of the summer, and I came on the farm, and I usually would stay there for like 2 or 3 weeks and just like live there. And if I could, I'd spend all summer there, but sometimes I wasn't able to do that. But this summer I came there and I was all excited. And I came on the yard, and there the whole atmosphere of the farm had just changed. And it was just a very strange, unsettling feeling. Like it wasn't the same dynamic that the property used to have, that I loved and that I would just look forward to every year. And I remember feeling a little bit unsettled, but I was like, you know what? It's your first 1 or 2 nights here. Like you're just getting used to the quiet. It's a big deal. Who cares? And then as I spent my days, I found that I just couldn't go on that side of the property. Like there was the pasture was fine. I could go on that side of the property, and they had quite a large property. So past the pasture, there was like a lot of bush or forest, and then you'd hit the highway. But there was like a lot that you could go through on that side. I think it was about 80-acre property. I can't remember exactly how big it was. But on the other side, it was about the same amount to the property line. But there was like a cow pen in there, and then there was forest, and I couldn't go on that side. I didn't understand why. It got to the point where I'd be sitting in the living room. My grandparents had this big vaulted and they had these big windows, and the windows that faced that side of the property, I would just feel really, I didn't want to sit in front of them. I didn't want to look outside of them. They had this really big living room window, this huge windows, and like I didn't want to look out the front windows. I was like nervous to look out them. And I was like, this is like silly, Natasha. Like, what's going on? Right. And at night, I would not go outside. And at night, I could not look out the windows. It didn't matter what room I was in, would not look out the windows. And I was always nervous to go to bed. But I had this like, it would get to the point where I would like get sick in my stomach. Like I literally get sick. And just the thought of looking outside the windows. And sometimes I'd almost feel wanting to look out, like almost like almost being encouraged to look out the windows, but I wouldn't. Like, I kind of like, hey, maybe I should look out the window. And I'd be like, nope, not doing that. Just nope, not doing that. And I'd be watching the TV and I'd just be like, tunnel vision, kind of like just, or something, just so I wouldn't look out the windows. And I even during the day, I wouldn't go to that side of the property or really look at it, which is just weird, like, and the neighbors were far away, so it wasn't like it was people that were scaring me, nothing like that. So I would go to bed, and my grandmother had this sewing room that was like it had a long bungalow house, and that was in the middle of the house, the sewing room. So their bedroom was on one side, they had a spare bedroom on the other. But I always slept in my grandma's sewing room because my grandma she was a seamstress and she sewed all the time, and it was really nice being in there because she was always there sewing. So I always felt really close to her and safe in that bedroom. So they had a little cot in there, and I'd always sleep in there instead. My grandma always thought, like, why don't you sleep in the nice bedroom? And I'd be like, no, I like this bedroom. And I remember so many times going to bed and being the window to the bedroom was like right in front of, like, if I lay down in the bed, like the window was like right there. And it was a really big window too. And I just was like terrified, terrified to look out that window. I would literally go to sleep with the blankets over my head because I didn't want to wake up and accidentally look out the window. And I was just like, and I remember there were times where I said, Grandma, can you just close the drapes? And she's like, there's nobody here. You're on the farm. Like what's the problem? And sometimes she wouldn't close the windows because she's, you're being silly, Natasha. What's wrong with you? And I couldn't tell her that I was terrified uh, about looking out the window, because then she'd go like, what are you terrified of? And then I'd have to tell her that I was really scared I'd wake up and see this big hairy creature looking at me. That's what I was terrified of, that there would be this big hairy creature with this big face just staring at me. But I was convinced that if I woke up in the middle of the night and opened up my eyes, I would see a big hairy creature standing there. And so I was just like, I just, so because my grandma, I guess she wanted to like set me straight. So she didn't want to enable me or like cater to this. So she was just like, no, Natasha, like, no, we'll leave the window open. You'll be fine. Right. And one time she like actually opened the window, like opened it so that we would get fresh air in there. And I was just like, that whole night, I was just like it was just awful. It was just the worst night of my whole entire life. I thought, just like, what am I gonna do if the hand reaches in or something happens? Like, why would she open the window? Like, why would you do that? Right? I remember waking up at like, I think it was like 2 in the morning, and like crawling on the floor so I wouldn't look out the window, and reaching up and like cranking it shut because we had these cranking open windows. And I just remember like trying to keep my head below the windowsill and just cranking this dumb window shut because that thing wasn't gonna get at me, right? And I can honestly tell you, I do not remember ever waking up and seeing something like there was nothing I can put my finger on. So I always thought, Natasha, you're being stupid. It's your imagination. You're exactly like all the adults and people keep telling you. You are over dramatic. You have way too big of like you're just dumb. You're not that special that Sasquatch would come and say hi to you or torment you. You are just absolutely not that special, girl. Like you're just no, right? So I was just like, okay, well, I will just sleep for the whole summer. Doesn't matter how hot it gets. I don't care. I'm just gonna sleep with these blankets over my head and maybe suffocate myself with the pillow if I put it over my head just so that they can't see me, right? Like I'll just like I don't care what happens. I'm not looking out that window. That's how kids are. They're just they think of things that are silly. And I would have these dreams that were kind of scary. Like I'd have nightmare dreams that I was, being watched or that I would be followed or like things like that. And I remember there was one night, it was in partway through my stay. I think it was about halfway through my stay. And I had this really, really terrible dream. I had this dream that somebody was planning, wanting to break into the house through the front door, and there was a big long hallway that you went down to get to all the bedrooms, and that they would murder everybody in the house. And my brother was there as well, like he was staying there at the time, and that there'd just be this bloodbath. I just remember in the dream, like there'd just be this bloodbath. Everybody would die, right? Nobody would be spared. And I remember in the dream, because even as a young person, I learned to kind of control the narrative of my dreams. So if it got too weird or too scary, or I didn't like the way it was going, I could sometimes change it or talk to myself in my dreams or kind of manipulate my dreams so that I could maybe not have too bad of a nightmare or something like that, or wake myself up, whatever. So in my dream, I remember being absolutely terrified because this thing was outside and it was going to, like, savagely murder all of us in our beds. And I was like, I remember in the dream going, well, you know what? I could hide in the linen closet. Because when I was a really little kid, my grandma had this big linen closet that had these really deep shelves. And it was like a specially built house. So my grandma had made them build the linen closet. So it had lots of shelves, but they were very, very deep. And she could like store blankets and pillows. And it was like a really great linen closet. It held a lot of stuff, but it also held kids. Because when I was really little, I played hide and go seek. I would often climb up to like almost near the ceiling and get right in the back of those shelves behind all the blankets. And I never got found. I was like so good at hide and seek. And everybody always got mad at me because nobody ever found me because I was always in the back of that linen closet. And I know that my grandma probably would have murdered me had she known that I spent half my summers hiding in the back of that linen closet. But it was the most awesome linen closet. It had a big door. It was like had a shelves on this side and you could walk in. And it was great. But anyway, I'd gotten a little too big for that. I was like 9 or 10. Maybe I was 10 because I was too big to climb up those shelves. I probably would have like been too heavy for them. But I thought to myself, in a time of great need, Natasha, you could probably still make it up to the top shelf and hide behind those blankets in a time of need, Natasha. I'm sure grandma would forgive you if, you had to do it, right? Like, kids think. And so I thought in the dream, I pictured the linen closet. I pictured the shelves in my brain. And I said I could go there and I would be safe. I'd climb up to the top shelf and I would hide. And this thing that's in my there in my dream with me wouldn't find me. And I remember lying there being quite proud of myself, thinking, I've solved the problem. Like, that's good. And then, like, I heard this very calm, very rational, very factual voice. And it just went, no, I can smell you. And I remember just in my dream, just my heart just stopped. I woke up screaming because this overwhelming knowledge that I couldn't get away. There was nowhere in this earth that I could hide that this thing wouldn't find me because it could smell me like a dog, right? And I was just like, I remember just that had such an impact on me that for the rest of the summer I was just my heart was in my throat. It just affected my whole stay. I think I ended up leaving early. I just remember being like it was just so overwhelming and upsetting, and I never told anybody about it because I just thought it was a nightmare, and I just thought you're just being dumb. And that was around the time about a year or two earlier where that big Bigfoot movie came out where the hand comes through the window and he pulls the person through the window or whatever. So I thought, maybe you watched that commercial just a bit too much and it's gotten in your head and you're just because I for being imaginative and stuff, I was a thoughtful person, so I didn't get too carried away in my mind. I was able to rationalize myself to the point where I could calm down. So I thought, well, maybe you just watch too many stupid movies, Natasha, and this is all just in your head, right? So um, Yeah, that was probably the first real experience that I had with a supernatural kind of being or entity, or that sort of interfered with my safety, or my feeling of safety, the context of what the world was and wasn't. And I had other experiences where I had sort of interference where um, things would do sort of similar things like that. And but that was the first that I can really remember that was really impactful for me, and really I had a really hard time processing that. And I remember I wouldn't go back to my grandparents' farm for a long time. And then I finally got the nerve to go back. It was like Christmas that year. And you'll just laugh. It's just so funny. It's almost like a horrible, horrible comedy. We were driving in the car. We were going to my grandparents, and over the radio, the news the news says, "Oh, and people in rural Manitoba have been spotting this thing. They are calling it a Bigfoot or a Sasquatch, but we think it's just an injured bear, and it's around the Piney area." And I remember just like losing my mind in the backseat of the car, going, "Mom, mom, mom! There's a Bigfoot! Or, there's a Bigfoot! There really is a Bigfoot!" And my mom goes, "Oh, Natasha." There's no Bigfoot, and it's nowhere near Sardo, near your grandparents' farm. It's like you're fine. Don't worry about it. And then as we're coming up to the turn to go to my grandparents' farm, there's a sign that says Piney, like 10 kilometers. And I wasn't stupid. I knew just what 10 kilometers meant, right? And in my mind, I'm like, those, they can run real, like 10 kilometers is nothing to a Bigfoot. And I remember just losing my mind. I was just like, and my mom, she just couldn't make me feel better about it. I was just like, and after that, they turned the radio off, and they didn't play the radio for a while in the car. But it was just, like that's just how life works sometimes. Like I'm glad I can find humor in it, because had I not been someone who can find humor in it as a child, I probably would have never ever returned to my grandparents' farm ever again. But after the Piney incident and stuff, the next summer, I was a little older. I guess I'd rationalized a lot of it. I went back to the farm. And interestingly enough, all of those feelings, all of that really malevolent atmosphere was gone. And I never ever had a feeling like that on that property ever again. It was like that thing just passed through that summer and just kept walking. I guess maybe he was tired of Piney. Sardo was boring, so he was moving on to somewhere else. Like, but I guess maybe he felt like he was gonna play with a few people's minds before he left. But he took some time, had a little fun, and then got bored and moved on. Thank goodness. Uh, you know, but that I spent many years on that farm, and I can tell you that after that summer, it was like it never happened. It was like for that summer, um, it's almost like it was a different property. And then when I went back, I there was no fear anymore, and I went right back to my old ways. I would pack a lunch, take my horse. I would go take books and read. Go tie my horse up to a tree, or actually, he didn't really move very much, so we just left him. And I would eat my lunch and read a book, and my horse would just sit there, and I'd sit out there for hours. So it was just a very strange, yeah, very strange experience. But because of that, I don't think I ever didn't believe in Sasquatch. I think I always struggled with the idea of, just I could never really forget what happened to me that summer. And yeah, I felt the whole summer that there was something living in my head. Like that's really what it felt like. It felt like there was something living in my head. And that all day long, it was just living in my head. And it could hear my thoughts, and it didn't talk to me until that night, but it suggested things like look in the woods, and I would be scared to look in the woods. Like it didn't say look in the woods, but I'd be like, oh, maybe I should look in the woods. But in my mind, right away, I'd go, don't look in the woods. And that night in that nightmare, that that thing was in my nightmare, and it was there waiting, and it was there listening, and it was almost like it was playing uh, um, funny business, with a 10-year-old kid. It seemed to, when it said no, but I can smell you. It said it with a, it took way too much pleasure out of reminding me that I had nowhere to go. And that was that's my first story. That's sort of the one that I contacted you about, and that still causes me, you know, pause to think. Like,
Those are the exact kind of encounters that keep me up at night. And you don't know what to do with something like that. And how do you classify that? I firmly believe that you had an encounter with either a Bigfoot or possibly even a dog man. And there's a lot to get into, but what was it about being on the property there with your grandma, that part of the property? What about that made you feel scared? Was it just a feeling, or do you remember specifically if something happened, or was that just something you felt?
it was just a real heavy spiritual feeling. Like, it wasn't something someone told me. It wasn't something I saw. It was just this boundary line. That's how it felt. It felt like this is his part of the property, and this is our part of, and don't cross that line. This is the line. Don't cross it. And it wasn't. It was like such a heavy spiritual feeling. That's the only thing I can say, is that it was just this heavy, and if you got to, you felt like physically sick. Yeah, it was just this terror that wasn't like an act of terror where you're sweating and crying and whatever. It was just this like pervasive, this is not a good place to be because you could get hurt.
As a 19-year-old kid, that is absolutely terrifying. I mean, at any age, that would be terrifying. I've heard of one other encounter like that where a guy had an encounter in a dream. When he woke up, there was some physical evidence there, and I kind of think that's what's happened with you. I mean, you had this dream, but the mind speak woke you up, and that is physical evidence to you that something was there. And I believe in mind speak. I hear too many people come on the show and share those encounters like that. But when you heard that voice, can you describe to us how it made you feel, and then also a little bit more detail about the voice, maybe kind of how it sounded, and just break that down a little bit more for us.
First of all, I don't think it was a dog man. I don't. Because the one thing that I could visualize what I was scared of seeing, and it was a Bigfoot. Like, I could visualize what I did not want to see outside of that window. I knew what I didn't want to see, and it was the typical Bigfoot, but it was a very large Bigfoot. Like, it wasn't. It was a very took up most of the window, and that was like a massive window, and like, it was a big Bigfoot. But I don't remember envisioning any colored eyes or anything. Just it was just a Bigfoot. And I remember the actual image in my brain of what I didn't want to see. Like, I knew what it was like you could see a picture in your brain of what I don't want to see. I know what it looks like. I can describe to you what it looks like, and that's not what I want to see. And so that was not what I ever wanted to see in my window, and so I never wanted to look at it. I can't tell you that I looked at it and saw it. I just know what I didn't want. There is a visual image in my head of what I didn't want to look at. And it didn't look like a dog man, because I know what a dog man looks like. This was a definite Sasquatch. And I do believe that it was a male Sasquatch, because it had a very, very male feeling to it. Like, it was definitely a guy, like a very masculine Sasquatch. And it was not, I don't know if it was like hideously evil, but it was definitely not nice. It wasn't friendly. It wasn't like it was trying to be Harry and the Hendersons, my best friend. No, it was being. Um, I remember waking up that night and just feeling like I was going to die. Like, I was going to die. And I remember it was like the middle of the night. I didn't look at the time, but I'm sure it was around 3 or 4 in the morning. And I just remember waking up thinking that there was nowhere I could go and I could die at any moment. Actually, it wasn't that I was going to die, it was that I could die at any moment, whether they felt like it or not. That was the impression I got. That was sort of the feeling behind no, but I can smell you. Kind of that's how the impression was. It was like I didn't get the impression that he was going to break in at any moment and murder all of us and are like right now this is going to happen. I remember it was almost like he was putting that in my head to scare me. And then when I said, "Oh, but I can hide," it was like, "No, but I can smell you." But when I woke up, it was the feeling of it was like they wanted me to know that they could do it.
That's a threat, 100% a threat. And, I get flack sometimes, especially if you go back and look at some of my older videos, because I've called these things out as being evil. And can they be evil? Yeah, absolutely. Can they be good? Sure. But I think sometimes they are pure evil. And, I mean, it was absolutely letting you know that, hey, I'm here. I could get to you if I wanted to. I mean, that's just such a threatening statement for that thing to make. And also think you saw this creature, and I think your brain just buried it because it didn't know what to do with it. I mean, what else are you supposed to do with that? And, that's what makes sense to me. And especially with you being able to vividly describe it like you could and knew exactly what you were afraid of. If you would kind of describe for us what this thing looked like in your mind, and give us as much description as you can.
Oh, it was very large, like very tall, because I'm sure it would have been 9 feet, maybe more. And it had very, very broad shoulders because it's like it was a very wide windows. And the image that I remember the most was that they took up most of the window. And the face was not hairy. It was sort of the typical Sasquatch face with the flatter nose and the kind of humanoid look to it. Um, and that it had brown, and this is weird because I don't know why I'd know the color of the hair because it would have been looking at me through a window that was backlit. So if I'd seen a figure in there, I shouldn't have known what the color of its hair was because it was backlit in the middle of the night. But I remember it had like a browny color to the hair. It was long hair, and it was just a very big creature. And it didn't have a friendly face, but it didn't have a terrifying one either. Like it didn't like have that like like how sometimes you see Bigfoot, it's got big teeth and hole, stuff. It didn't have that, but it was just very you know what it felt like? It kind of felt like a serial killer Sasquatch. It really did, because it was very like very practical about how it was going to kill people. Like it was like, no, I can smell you. No, I could kill you if I wanted to. No, I'm just standing here scaring the crap out of you every day. I kind of like it. That's kind of the that's kind of the impression I got from it. It was just like, yeah, like when I picture it looking at me, it doesn't have a scowl. It doesn't. It's got a very neutral expression. It's just staring at me like, boo. Like it was almost like, yeah, it's almost like, hey, boo. Like I know that I'm laughing. I'm laughing at it, but it's because it's just so weird, like it's and I'm a I do comedy and stuff, so it's like when you think about these things, and when you suffer from mental health issues, because I'm bipolar, and maybe that's people often say that people with genetic disorders or illnesses tend to attract these creatures. And perhaps maybe it was because I was kind of hemorrhaging spiritually as a child. A lot of things happened to me as a kid. And so perhaps maybe I was vulnerable spiritually or whatever. Maybe that's why it came to bug me. I have no idea. Or maybe it just liked to pick on kids. I have no idea. But when you've been through a really, really, really rough life, and you've stared death in the face a couple of times, and you had some really bad things happen to you, you tend to look at a lot of these things like with a sense of humor, a dark humor. And I think we do that just to cope with what the possibilities and stuff. And that's why I'm not making fun of anybody that believes in Bigfoot. I'm absolutely not demeaning anyone's Bigfoot experiences. I'm just telling you that um that's just how I look at these things, because how if you can't cry, laugh, right?
That's some good solid advice. And I know in my law enforcement career, I used humor a ton because it's the only thing I knew to do to cope with the things that we were seeing. And yeah, that makes total sense to me that you would do that. I think most of us do that. And this thing must have just been passing through and left, because when you came back, it was a completely different feeling. And that makes sense. I mean, your body, your brain knew this thing was there, and there's no telling how long this thing had been watching you. I noticed you mentioned 3 a.m. and we talked about that a little bit earlier before the interview. If you would kind of get into that, why you think that's significant, and then also let's get into some of these other encounters you've had and go through those.
Well, believe it or not, 3 a.m. is kind of an important thing for me because it's bothered me all my life. After that Bigfoot thing and stuff, and even a little bit before that, as a child, I would always wake up at around 3 a.m. at night and have night terrors. You know how people talk about feeling presences in their room at the end of their bed, feeling like they're being suffocated, feeling like they're being held down, feeling like they're being stared at or whatever. Um, I would have experiences like that repeatedly, like always somebody coming and messing with me in the middle of the night. And I was always too embarrassed to tell anybody this, to let anybody know. But I spent like half of my childhood and even teenage years sleeping on the floor beside my parents' bed because they just got used to it, because I was so terrified to be alone in my bedroom, because I always felt that there was this visitation at night. And it was it was frightening, like really frightening. And as a kid, you don't really know what's happening to you, and then people say you're making it up and you just want attention. And it had nothing to do with that. I wanted to stay in my bedroom. I was a really private kid. I liked my bedroom. I didn't want to be scared out of my bedroom constantly. And it didn't matter where I was. I could be at my grandma's, I could be at a friend's house, I could be anywhere, and I'd have these feelings. It wasn't just my bedroom. So it wasn't that my house was haunted or anything like that. It happened to me everywhere I went and every new house that we had. Because even as a young adult in university, I still would sleep in my parents' bedroom sometimes at night, because I'd have these weird things that would happen to me at 3 a.m. And because I would have these really weird experiences, I did, as a young person, we grew up as Christians, but my parents never really enforced it very much. We I never really went to church all the time. I knew about God. My grandma was very religious. She taught me a lot about Jesus and everything like that. But I was a city girl, and my parents were kind of city Mennonites, so they weren't really as as strict Christians. So when I was in my teens, I was really searching and trying to figure out, well, young girls nowadays, they all think they're witches, or they all want to be psychics, or they all want to be like whatever, like supernatural, some kind of stupid stuff like that. And, it was starting back then even. So I thought, well, maybe I have powers. Maybe I have this, special powers or whatever. And maybe I'm psychic, and maybe that's why these things are bothering me and stuff like that. And, like I would wake up and I'd hear this chanting, and it was like the Gregorian monk kind of chanting, but it wasn't good chanting. And I remember being terrified that they would know that I could hear them and psychically come and attack me. Like I literally felt like I had to be really still and really quiet and try not to listen to them, because if they detected I could hear them, they would come for me. And I had that a lot. I also had, I thought I saw figures walking around. Like even I remember one time I went to sleep in my parents' bedroom when I was like 12 or 13, and I lay down and I saw someone get out of the bed, or not the bed, but get out of what I thought it was my dad. I saw someone get up, step over me, and go into their walk-in closet. And I went, Dad, Dad. And I remember sitting up, because I was like, he didn't come out of the closet. And when I looked in the closet, there was nobody there. I was like, that's weird, right? Maybe I'm sleeping. This is weird. So I stood up and my dad was sleeping in the bed. So I was like, okay, just go back to bed, Natasha. Now you're just, like, like whatever, right? So it was always like around 3 a.m. And when I started delving into all this psychic stuff, um, they always talked about the witching hour. And everybody thinks that's midnight, but it's not. I was actually terrified to find out that the witching hour is actually 3 a.m. And it terrified a lot, like because that's when I had most of the like it felt like spiritual attacks. I would wake up, couldn't go back to sleep. It would haunt me. It would like sometimes like drive me out of my room. It was just it was really bad. And we always just thought it was my bipolar disorder, whatever, right? So I got into learning about astral projection and tarot cards. I was actually really good at tarot cards, but I don't think it was because I was had any special powers. I think it was because I was just really good at reading people and I was really good at counseling people. And I think that I just did that and people thought I was fantastic, but I wasn't. There was no special power. It was just being able to talk to people really well. And I was an actress. I could read people really well. I think that's what it was. But I think because I opened a door and allowed them to lie to me and come in, it got worse and worse and worse. And now that I look back on that nightmare experience, that with Bigfoot, it was around 3 a.m. Like it was around that time of night. And it's interesting because I was always haunted by this 3 a.m. And it's true. I know a lot of people who have terrible experiences that happen to them around that time of night. And today I saw a podcast. I don't remember the gentleman, but he explained the 3 a.m. experience in a Christian way. And you know what? It really blew my mind and helped me because 3 a.m. has been explained to me from a pagan witchcraft point of view. So it's always been a scary time. And because of my life experiences, it's always been a really, really anxious period of the day for me. But this gentleman explained that it's the third watch and that Christ might be waking you up to pray. Christ might be waking you up to protect yourself. Christ might be waking you up to have some special quiet time with you and speak to you. Christ might be actually just wanting you to sit in stillness with them, and that it may not be evil attacks, it could be God. And I thought to myself, wow, what a way to spin it. What a way to protect yourself. Because if 3 a.m. is actually both things, the most vulnerable time that you can be attacked, but yet the most holy time that you can commune with God. Like I was only told about the bad stuff. I was lied to. I was told to be afraid and couldn't protect myself, and I was wide open. When really the truth is that both are not exclusive. And that if I don't want to be afraid, I don't need to be afraid because I don't need to lean into the bad things at 3 a.m. I can just pray to God and commune with the Lord, and I'm fine and I'm good. And so that's why the 3 a.m. thing really means something to me because that Bigfoot nightmare happened at that time. Most of my really bad spiritual experiences of being like attacked spiritually always happened at that time. I heard voices at that time. Um, I tried to astral project at one day, and it was around that time of night, and I felt that it was really weird. I was lying in bed. I felt like something grabbed me and threw me around the room, like hit me against the walls and everything. And when I woke up, I was still lying in the bed, but I was half off the bed, and my lamp was like, but I was lying in bed, right? So I just want people to know that don't believe the hype. Don't listen to just the dark side. Because just like with every darkness, you can't have darkness without light, and you can't have light without darkness. And they always exist together at the same time. Because everywhere in the world, if one side of the world is dark, the other side has sunshine shining on it. And that's how you have to see the 3 a.m. thing, is you have to go, you know what? Bad people use this time of day for bad things. But good people, this is the time of day you can embrace that as a period of strength. And the reason why it really affected me was I was thinking about the Bigfoot story because of our talk the other day. And when this gentleman said, hey, look at 3 a.m. in a totally different light, I was like, yeah, you know what? You're right. Totally. Totally right.
That's some amazing, solid advice. And there's a reason on this channel I always say, stay prayed up. You know, a lot of times we don't think about that, but if the veil is thinner at 3 a.m. for the darkness, then it's absolutely maybe thinner for the light, and you're able to reach God a little better at that time. And maybe that's why, you know, sometimes He does wake you up like that. And I'm glad that you saw that. I'm glad you changed your life, and I'm glad that you know, lean towards the light. I mean, that's some great advice. And you know, with the encounter that you've had, which is the wildest encounter, absolute terrifying, you know, with you mix in the dreams and Bigfoot and all the things that have happened to you through your life. I'm really interested to see what you think these things are. So there's no wrong answer, but what do you think Bigfoot is?
Well, you know, I've been interested in cryptozoology for many decades now, probably because of my experience as a child. Um, and I've done a lot of research on the Bigfoot phenomena. And I know a lot of people think they're interdimensional. Some people think they're just flesh and blood. Some people think they're both. Some people think they're aliens, all these different things. And, you know, to tell you the truth, I'm not quite sure. I get the feeling that they're more flesh and blood. But I do think that they're capable of doing things that we're not. Because in the Bible, it says that God made man, and man is very separate from the animal kingdom. We're not the same as the animals that God created. We're different. And I think that that's very true when it comes to Bigfoot. Now, hey, you know what? If Bigfoot is an interdimensional being, then maybe that's how he has those powers. I have no idea. Or maybe, you know, maybe it's just something that they have because of their species. I don't know. I do think that they are capable of that infrasound because I think that's what I felt. I think that that was that line in the sand, that barrier, because I literally could not go over the fence. Like I physically couldn't go. There was a fence between the house and that side of the. I could not go over that fence. I couldn't go near that fence. It was a physical barrier. It was like a unseen physical barrier. Just and it wasn't necessarily the fear of God in there that was keeping me out. It was just this heavy, like a solid wall of just don't come here, and I couldn't cross it. And so maybe that was infrasound, maybe that was psychic. I have no idea. Some people think that they're Nephilim or fallen angels. I don't know. I'm not sure what they are, but I do know that the one thing that I do know that we should never do with Bigfoot is that we should never aggrandize them. We should never create mythical, supernatural uh, adoration of these creatures because then we're giving them something that they're not. I don't think that you should ever treat them like demigods, these magical creatures. I don't think that we should make them guardians of the forest because I don't think they are. I think they're just like bears. I think that they do hunt animals. I think they do eat meat. I think they can be aggressive or they cannot be aggressive. They're like a bear. There are sometimes you walk into the woods and a brown bear, you'll see it and you'll go boo and it'll run away. Or sometimes you'll meet a brown bear that's in a really bad mood that day and it'll attack you and kill you. I think that Sasquatch has the same. It's a tiger, it's a polar bear, it's a bear, it's a predator, it's just there. And I don't think that, I think sometimes there's certain cultures and groups of people in this world that talk about Bigfoot almost like he's an eco activist. A lot of times they say, oh, he's protecting the forest and hunters are bad because he's a vegetarian. Well, I don't think that he's a vegetarian. I don't think he's an activist. I don't think he's political. I think he's a different species from us. And I think he's a predator and an animal. And I think that if we go too far and give him too much power, adoration, myth, then we are lying to ourselves and we're going to mistake his purpose here and his what it is. And I see because I'm in Canada and a lot of people in Canada are really environmentalists and they're really like there's some cultures here that really try to make it seem like he's been part of their people forever and he, you know, he's man of the forest and all these kind of things. Well, if he was, I think that human beings would have a different relationship with him by now. And there are peoples who have lived in these forests for hundreds of years who have said that these creatures attack them and people go missing and they get killed. So if these creatures are somehow these protectors and all these things, then they wouldn't be hunting people down and killing them. Or like in Alaska, there's that town that nobody can live in because apparently Sasquatch is just murdering people left or right. I just don't. I think that when you try to um, appropriate a wild animal as a being of your people and culture, um, I think you're making a mistake. And I don't think that's what Sasquatch is. I think Sasquatch is just a large animal that has maybe some things that humans don't, and maybe living around humans or knowing about them for so long. I think that they've adapted just like every other creature. And I think they probably understand us better because they may have higher reasoning than other animals. I mean, they are humanoid and ape-like. So I believe that maybe they have the capability of understanding human species a little bit better than, let's say, cats or dogs or deer, you know. And if they're predators, they would be learning all the time. And I think we're just part of their food chain. I think sometimes they don't attack us because we might be in groups, or maybe they know that we have guns and can hurt them, or maybe they just don't bother that day, or maybe they're hungry that day, or maybe they're ticked off that day, or maybe they're in a good mood that day. I don't know. But I think that if you make Sasquatch into this um, environmentalist god, or you make him into this spiritual protector of your people, or you like people used to make those mistakes with other animals in the animal kingdom. And I think that if we're going to do any justice to Bigfoot, I think we have to study him. I think we have to get to know his species. And I think we have to treat him like the animal and the creature that he truly is. And I think that if you put too much magic, supernatural myth, and ignorance, willful ignorance around his species, then no, we're never going, and we may end up hurting him.
That's a good way to put it. And you dropped a lot of good information in there. And for me, it's like I kind of go back and forth. But one thing I do know for sure is they got to fit into the biblical worldview. And there's a lot of things in God's universe we don't understand. I kind of go back and forth with these things and trying to figure this stuff out. And we might not ever know. And I don't think any of us can know. We're just taking educated guesses at this point. And it's what keeps us all coming back, trying to figure out these really strange encounters and experiences. But with all that being said and all the stuff that's happened to you, you've been through a lot and experienced a lot. And one of the strangest encounters I've heard to date. But what do you think kept you safe that night?
To tell you the truth, I have absolutely no idea. I get the impression, just like I said, I don't think that that creature was thinking of killing me that night or my family. I think that he just wanted me to know that he could. Because I believe that that wasn't the first time that he came and bugged me. And I think that, I think he just wanted me to know that he could do it. I think he just wanted to scare somebody. I think that I don't think there was any protection because I woke up knowing that there was nothing that could protect me. No windows, no glass, no doors, nothing. That thing could get through a wall if it wanted to. There was nothing. It was big. It was big. It was powerful, and it could smell you. So, and that's what he wanted me to know, that there was absolutely nothing but his discernment and his mood, and that, yep, that there was nothing that was gonna, I could do anything about it.
I think you're right. There's nothing you could have done. If this thing wanted you, it would have got you. And I think sometimes, missing 411 people or people that just go missing, and they run into these creatures. They're running into maybe a creature that has not been kept in check by an alpha male. It's left the tribe. Maybe just a rogue male Bigfoot wandering around. And I think a lot of times that's what happened. And it makes a lot of sense to me. But, I appreciate you coming on the show. You're really brave for coming forward like that and just sharing your encounter.
Before we go, I did want to say that, they could be fallen angels and they could be interdimensional creatures, but we don't know. And I did want to say this. I strongly believe that because humanity is losing its faith and it's losing its humanity, that we are, as a species, as a society, opening a door to a lot of things that were held back before. It's like, have you ever watched Stranger Things, The Upside Down? We're letting it in because we are going back to paganism. We're going back to Paleolithic cultures that worshipped forces in nature, and those are not kind. They are not, they're like fairies. You know, they always talk about fairies. Either they're not good or bad. They're fairies, they're foreigns, they're not us. They don't think like us, they don't feel like us. I mean, if you look at the practices of people who worshipped Odin, were just brutal. A lot of Paleolithic gods were about human sacrifice and blood rituals and stuff. So I think what might be happening with Sasquatch and the fact that we're seeing more of these creatures and having more interactions with them and more creatures like dogmen and just really bad demonic presences and stuff is because we are literally turning our backs on what has kept the door shut for centuries. I really honestly believe the best way I can describe it is this is our soul on Satan, and before that was our soul on God. Because I really believe that when you have a society that is faith filled and believes in a certain amount of safety spiritually, it nullifies and puts up this like barrier, and you don't feel ghosts, you don't feel all these things because there's just this barrier of God between you and these things, and the veil is thick and shut. But because we've been inviting them in, um, yeah, I think that's where all these visitations are coming from.
Well, Natasha, I 100% agree with what you're saying. We need to get back to the basics, back to the way the things have been. And, on this channel, I'm never going to shy away from talking about Jesus and my faith. And I think it all ties together with Bigfoot. I look at everything through a biblical lens, but, I'm just grateful that you chose this platform to come forward and to share your encounter. I'm glad you reached out, and I'm glad you're here to share it. If you need something in the future, please reach out and let me know. Guys, thanks for hanging out with us tonight. What a wild encounter. I mean, that's definitely, I've not really heard one like hers, and it just really makes you question so much. And I always walk away with way more questions than answers. That continues to be a theme through this whole process. And we might not ever get the answers, but, hopefully we're learning something. And if you're sitting on an encounter, please come forward with it. There's people that need to hear your encounter, and I would love to give you the platform to do that. You can always email me at mysteriesunknownpodcast@gmail.com. Even if you just need somewhere to get it off your chest and you don't want to come on the show, I'd be happy to talk to you. It might take me a few days to get back to you, but I absolutely will. And if you've made it to the end of the episode, please let me know in the comments section. I like to see who listens to these things. It means a lot to me. If you're a subscriber, a member, somebody who watches the show, I appreciate you so much. Just make sure you like and subscribe. Tell your friends and family so we can keep growing this and getting the word out. And let me also know what you'd like to hear on this channel. I'm thinking about doing some different stuff, like on another release day or something, just to kind of expand things a little bit. But always stay true to Bigfoot, Dogman. I love talking about that stuff. But couldn't do the show without you guys. And after this show tonight, you know exactly why I say what I'm about to say. It's the most important thing you could do. Stay prayed up, guys. We'll see you in the next episode.